So why are the good old days the good old days? As someone who reviews old games, at least for hobby, that is without a doubt the 64p question. What makes someone prefer the old times? Frankly, it's not as simple as, well, everything sucks now, because it doesn't. You know, like all good rhetorical questions, there just isn't an answer. Games are moving faster than ever these days, at a pace we couldn't have dreamed of years before. So many more people have access, and while that's dredged up a few, well, shall we say, unsavoury aspects of the hobby into the limelight, it also means that we're seeing more and more people who actually have something meaningful to say about gaming. There's something for everyone out there, whether it's big busty mainstream titles or the lowest slung jeans you can find in the indie sphere. It's all happening, and every damn one of us has some sort of opinion on it all. Some of us will even go so far as to shout it out loud on the virtual soapbox that is YouTube. Self-aggrandizing bastards that we are. But some of us, myself included, still hanker for the times when we were, perhaps, a bit simpler. I say we, I mean there's always been progress in gaming, as you'd expect from an art form that's still very much in its infancy. But we never knew better. We may be looking at those greener pastures for a soft focus, but so what? Troubles, doubts, criticism, analysis, acne, shaving, premature ejaculation, they were things that happened to other people. The good old days. Anyway, why is all this blather relevant? Why am I going on and on and on about the good old days versus the modern age? Well, because in a way it actually feels appropriate for this particular video. Simple as that. Because we have two games here in the main. One that lived and died in the 1980s, burning for an incredibly short time before having its candle snuffed out prematurely, seemingly never to return. The original Great Giana Sisters represents everything good and intriguing about the old days. And then, over 20 years later, the series was reborn, culminating in one of the best platformers of this current generation. Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams represents everything good and interesting about the modern age. One game cannot exist without the other, and it's rare to have that sort of subject in a video. It's not just about the old days, it's not just about the modern age, it's about everything, it's about both. And it makes for a damn good story as well. A story that, like most stories, begins at the beginning. It all starts with three young upstarts working for German software house Rainbow Arts, tasked with making a Mario-esque platforming game. Manfred Trenz did the graphics, Chris Hulsbeck was on sound, and lastly the game itself was coded by Armin Gessert. Their debut release, The Great Giana Sisters, was released for the Commodore 64 in 1987 to great acclaim. The magazines love it, and the people even more so. It's a banner title for the C64, and for Europe in general. A great leap forward from the single-screen platformers that had become commonplace, and the closest you could get to the perfection of Super Mario Bros. On a microcomputer. In fact, it turned out to be a little too close. Soon after its release, Nintendo themselves, ever gigantic and notoriously litigious, issued Rainbow Arts with a cease and desist, and the game was withdrawn from sale, never to return, doomed to live in infamy and obscurity. That's the basics, at least. On the whole, it doesn't seem like all that much, you know, especially when you first look at the game. Is it a Mario rip-off? Well, yeah. It's hard to deny. A lot of enemies are very similar, the controls are incredibly similar, Giana flies in a way strikingly reminiscent of the fat Italian plumber. We have very familiar castles and backgrounds, power-ups that have startlingly similar effects, even if they turn you into a member of the Slits as opposed to just a bigger you, and we even have incredibly uncanny level design. In fact, the first few levels of Giana are virtually identical to the first few levels of Mario. When you stack the evidence up like this, well, there's not a lot to say in the game's defence, at least in the beginning. However, after this opening, the game kind of drifts off into its own thing. The general Mario aesthetic is there, of course, but the game does evolve from being a rip-off into a compelling platformer made in the style of Mario. In fact, it's more than compelling. The game's 32 stages are frankly superb, becoming quite fiendish by game's end, with some little touches that make you want to grab as many gems as you can, rather than simply blitz through stage after stage without caring. It's short and fast enough to never get doll, mixing precision jumps and block-breaking mini-puzzles effortlessly. And there's the odd secret to be had here and there as well, which is always very nice. The game sits so right on the C64, with graphics and music that stand out on a system that was very famous for both, and controls that are only slightly spoiled by the need to use up for jump. In short, the Great Giana Sisters may have deserved the cries of rip-off that it got, but it deserved all the praise as well. There's a reason why the name was resurrected after so long, and it's because the original game was so damn good. But alas, it was all rather fleeting. As the game continued to gather momentum, ports being readied, sequels prepared, Nintendo became aware of it, got their super level 50 lawyers on the case, and the game was history. An Amiga port with perhaps slightly better controls but inferior and charmless graphics and sound was released just before the C&D. A lot of people still had the game for their Amiga though, thanks to those glorious pirate BBSs and the almighty X copy. A Spectrum port of the game was just about ready and had even been reviewed enthusiastically in magazines when the hammer went down. Unfortunately, despite presumably being finished and ready for release, a copy of the game has never surfaced. And a few other ports made it out as well. The Atari ST got the Amiga version, or was it the other way around? The MSX2 had a rather lacklustre port, and the Amstrad CPC's port was gruesomely bad. On the whole, they're not that worthy of note. Here, though, are all the official versions of the game on one screen. Now, did the game deserve eternal damnation for its sins? Well, no, not really. Of course, the paymasters did want something that was incredibly close to Mario, and that's what they got, so perhaps they do deserve some of the blame for this whole fiasco. I think, however, that the programmers themselves are generally innocent. Obviously the game's similar to Mario in many different ways, but they tried their damnedest to make it stand out as well. It's a smaller package, time's a lot tighter, the levels have a bit more snap to them I think. There's just no flab on the game, and it gets even better as it goes on. So many of these games always seem to go out with a whimper, but Giana just evolves with every new level and it takes it further and further into its own little world and far away from its influences. Mario clone or not, the quality of this title is there for all to see. The whole fiasco might have been born more out of sheer bravado and inexperience more than anything else. Maybe if Rainbow Arts had done something as simple as not call a game Great Giana Sisters, or if they hadn't stuck The Brothers Are History onto the cover art, maybe Nintendo wouldn't have started sniffing around. After all, it's not like this was the only Mario clone out there. It's just a shame that one of the absolute best ones, and one of the best platformers of its time, got snuffed out so quickly because of it. And so, the wilderness years began. Work had already begun on a sequel to Giana Sisters, but in the wake of the C&D the art assets were changed to something more futuristic, and the game reworked into an all-new robo-based platformer called Hard and Heavy. The controls are much the same and the level design is sort of similar, still lots of break-in blocks, but in any case it's not really that much of a Mario clone. The enemies are much harder to deal with, you're given a terrible bouncing weapon, and you've usually got to wait around quite a bit to find an opportunity to get moving. In general, the game is a great deal tougher than its progeny. It's not a bad game by any means, largely the same people worked on it and the music in particular rules, but it lacks the free flow that Giana had. And after that, well, there wasn't anything really, at least not official. All the brains behind the game pretty much went off to do their own things. Manfred Trenz went on to make Turrican virtually by himself, becoming a European legend in the process. Chris Hallsbeck became one of gaming's foremost composers for his work on Turrican, amongst many others. And Armin Gessert founded his own company, Spellbound Entertainment. They made a few titles such as Airline Tycoon, one of the Gothic games, and Chicago 1930, but for the time being, no Giana. However, the fans did their best to keep the name alive. The original game was ported unofficially to a lot of different formats, including Windows and the Nintendo DS. A fan-made hack of the game called Giana Sisters 2 was released unofficially for the C64 in 2005, adding a few new features as well as fixing up a couple of the original's bugs and the collision detection. In 2008, another fan, Rodolphe Braxel, released a sequel titled Giana's Return, a small unofficial release of course, but received very warmly by fans. It goes to show, I suppose, while some were very quick to dismiss the original as nought but a Mario clone, there was a dedicated group of fans who'd kept the name alive for years, and that work would eventually pay off. In 2009, the world was quite literally shocked by the release, after over 20 years, of the sequel to the Great Giana Sisters, developed by Spellbound with Armin Gessert once again at the helm. And if they were shocked enough by the return of this long-dead franchise, they would be even more shocked by the platform it was going to be on. It would be a Nintendo DS game, an official one. Like Jay-Z and Nas before them, Armin Gessert and Nintendo went on stage together and shook hands as if they were brothers. No more legal crap or anything like that. But was the game actually any cop? Well, let us go guerrilla style, get our camcorder out and film the DS, so I can show you what it looks like. My kingdom for some sort of output on this thing. Anyway, roll it. Giana Sisters DS is not so much a Mario-influenced game as it is a classic European platformer-influenced game. It reminds me of games like James Pond, Zool or Flink, or indeed the weirdly Japanese grandmother of most Euro platformers, New Zealand Story. It's one of the most beautiful games you can get for your DS as well, absolutely stunning 2D sprite art and animation. It's just the sort of thing that you see in your head when you think back to classic, beautiful 16-bit games. The soundtrack's a belter too, a rearranged take on already classic hall-spec tunes. But in the end the important question is, how does it play? Very well, thank you. There are a couple of little things you would expect from the DS, such as largely superfluous touchscreen and microphone actions in a game that basically uses buttons only, but well, they come with the territory, don't they? In all honesty, it's a very polished title indeed. The only real flaw with it is that it is a trifle easy, perhaps too much so for a seasoned platformer who doesn't already know the form. If you already know Giana Sisters or 90s platformers in general, you'll be laughing. And it would also make a brilliant game for a young child, as the difficulties pitched just right for them. The lack of difficulty is a minor issue, frankly, if you just let yourself slip away into the rhythm of collecting gems, going through levels inch by inch, unlocking bonuses and all of that good stuff. It's well worth playing, and a welcome return for the series. However, with the return would come a tragic goodbye. Giana Sisters DS would be Armin Gessert's final game. A few months after its release, he unexpectedly died of a heart attack at the age of 46. A premature and sad end for a fine programmer and games maker. With Gessert gone, Spellbound Entertainment would be reformed as a new company, Black Forest Games, retaining all rights including those to Giana, and they decided that the show would go on. In the summer of 2012, at the peak of the Kickstarter boom that saw no end of games achieve massive funding totals, a page for Project Giana came up, dubbed the grandchild of the Great Giana Sisters and an evolution of the original concept. It made its target on the last day, achieving a few Ks more than the 150,000 goal, before going through the judging process on Steam Greenlight and finally coming out on the other end as Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams. With souped up graphics, returning faces, and suitably skewed gameplay, it brings the series, and indeed this video, right up to the present day. So, after 25 long, mostly absent and occasionally crippling years, just how on earth are the sisters? Comparing Twisted Dreams with its ancestors is quite tricky. It has little in common with the original game aside from a few reference points, enemies, gems and the like. It's more of a progression from the DS game. The art style, the huge levels and such are all there, but they've been suitably beefed up. This is now a gorgeous 3D game, almost on a par with the likes of Trine, which isn't a light statement at all. The name aside, it is not really a retro-tinged game. It is in every way a modern platformer. You can now switch from regular to punk Giana at will, and more than just changing the character, switching changes the world, becoming the most important mechanic of the game in fact, a key to completing the levels and getting through the puzzles and sequences. There are no more lives either. Like most modern platformers, the game uses a checkpoint system, and as such the difficulty has been ramped up to an incredible degree. This game is very tough. So often you have to make insane switches between the light and dark, all the while being aware of your surroundings at all times. One false move and you're dead. It's the sort of game where you repeat a hard task perhaps many times until finally you complete it, at which point you feel fantastic. One major element of the past still survives though. There is so much to collect. Levels are chock full with secret areas, special collectibles, and thousands upon thousands of gems that urge you on, beckoning you towards places that are incredibly hard to reach, just so you can catch them all. As such, there's a major incentive to go through these levels again and again, because there's no way at all you'll see everything they have to offer the first time through. And of course, having a waiting system helps in that regard as well. The new modern style of Giana Sisters might not appeal to everyone. It may well be just plain too frustrating for some people, or some might feel that the checkpoint system reduces actual risk and turns each major challenge into a mere act of repetition until you get the sequence into your hands and pass it through muscle memory. It becomes a bit of a chore. Personally, I don't feel this way. I see such things as a task that ever so gradually you work further towards. The variety of the controls in Twisted Dreams also gives you a lot of chance to experiment and to perfect the methods. It is not an entirely linear platformer like a lot of these games are. The huge levels give the tasks a sense of achievement, as opposed to feeling like you're beating up a brick wall. If you just let the game take over, you can immerse yourself in these places. You could stay in them for a good half hour, maybe even an hour. It might be tough to reach all of those gems, but by God it'll be worth it. There are some flaws, of course. While the graphics are beautiful and the ability to transform everywhere, the world transforming with you, is a stunning achievement, there's not a lot of variety in the actual settings, at least not as much as there was in the DS game. Still, I can forgive this simply because the scale is so much larger here. I was also dismayed at the lack of a scrolling title screen, but well, that's just a silly nitpick, isn't it? Twisted Dreams is, for me, an exceptional platformer, and one of the best I've played from this generation. If it isn't on the same god tier level as the likes of Super Meat Boy and Rayman Origins, then it's certainly in the next best league. The new game may be an entirely different kettle of fish from the one that started it all, but it still has the same beating heart. After 25 years, the Giana Sisters are stronger than ever. And so we close the book on the story of the Great Giana Sisters. Not at an end, mind you, but at a new beginning. Twisted Dreams was by all accounts a great success, and is now available on Xbox Live, PSN and all sorts of things like that. I highly doubt it's the last anyone's heard of these two sisters. And how often were we able to say that in the past, eh? After all, the series has already died once. It could have easily been completely forgotten after the original was pulled from the shelves. It took over 20 years, but it eventually rose back like a phoenix from the ashes to become something that was most certainly new, but still an evolution that paid the necessary tribute to its origins before taking off into areas that the old games could never have hoped to touch. The best thing that can be done for an old series, perhaps, is to be able to truly pass it on to a new generation, while still retaining all the good things about it. Very few games get a chance to do that at all, and of the ones that have, few were as unlikely to get the chance as the Great Giana Sisters. But thankfully, it did. And with that said, it's time to end the video. As ever, thanks for watching, and wherever you are, whoever you may be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.